The moment the doors swung open, everything changed. Prince William is in a private room at St. James's Palace, forehead against a cold window, completely breaking down in tears. And the reason why is way more complicated than just one bad night. It starts with his uncle Earl Spencer showing up at a private palace reception, uninvited, walking straight past security and publicly confronting Queen Camilla over a piece of jewelry that belonged to Princess Diana. That's the image that set everything off. And honestly, when you actually look at what was said versus what happened, the whole thing reveals a fracture in the royal family that no amount of carefully managed PR can glue back together. So Earl Spencer pulls up to the private rear entrance of St. James's Palace at exactly 8:45 in the evening. The crisp evening air, the dark sedan, the whole dramatic setup. He doesn't have an official security clearance pass for this event. His name is not on the master guest list managed by the Lord Chamberlain's office. But here's the thing about being a peer of the realm with deep historical ties to the estate. You can slide past outer perimeter checkpoints without triggering immediate alarms, especially when the guards recognize exactly who you are and probably don't want to be the person who physically blocks Princess Diana's brother from entering a building. So he gets in. The reception inside is exactly what you'd expect from palace diplomacy. King Charles stands near a grand fireplace talking quietly with a European ambassador. Queen Camilla circulates through dignitaries and art patrons. It's a cultural preservation initiative, strictly non-political, the kind of evening where the inner circle relaxes away from cameras. And then the double doors swing open and Earl Spencer walks in, and that carefully constructed peace dissolves immediately. What makes this different from standard royal family tension is that Earl Spencer doesn't follow protocol. He doesn't wait for a formal introduction. He doesn't stand quietly in a greeting line. He walks with absolute purpose straight across the polished floorboards, ignoring stunned courtiers, and stops 3 feet from Queen Camilla. The room goes completely silent. Crystal glasses stop clinking. Everyone realizes they're watching an open, hostile family confrontation, and nobody knows what to do about it. Now, the relationship between the main branch of the royal family and the Spencer line has been a minefield since 1997. Both sides agreed to maintain a polite, distant public facade for Prince William and Prince Harry's sake. But Earl Spencer's aggressive entry proved those emotional wounds surrounding his sister's legacy are entirely unhealed. And the specific catalyst is where this gets interesting. Spencer is not known for rash, uncalculated outbursts. His previous actions have always been carefully weighed for maximum legal and media impact. So when he stands before Camilla, raises a single-gloved hand, and points directly toward her left lapel, he's not just causing a scene, he's executing a calculated move. He demands an immediate explanation for why a specific, highly sentimental piece of private family history is being openly displayed at a public state function without the express written consent of the Spencer estate trustees. The object in question is a unique diamond and sapphire brooch that originally belonged to the Spencer family archives before being gifted to Diana on her wedding day in 1981. This piece was a cornerstone of the late princess's personal collection, a symbol of her maternal heritage she wore to multiple high-profile international engagements. After her passing, the legal ownership of her personal effects was divided under a complex network of private trusts. This created a vast legal gray area regarding which items belonged permanently to the crown, and which pieces were strictly bound to her biological descendants. So when Earl Spencer sees Camilla wearing this brooch, he's not just seeing jewelry, he's seeing what he considers a violation of his sister's legacy and his family's property rights. The tension reaches a breaking point as King Charles steps forward to intervene between his wife and his former brother-in-law. His personal security detail immediately moves to encircle the group, attempting to form a physical human shield to block the view of remaining guests and prevent any smartphones from capturing the raw domestic dispute. Charles demands the conversation be moved immediately into a private office upstairs, but Spencer refuses to back down. He states clearly that if the palace chooses to display private family property in public, they have to be prepared to defend that choice in front of the entire court. That open defiance introduces a secondary mystery that honestly might be even more damaging than the confrontation itself. The guest list for this reception had been locked down 3 weeks prior. Every invitation card was coded with an individual digital signature to prevent unauthorized duplication or transfer. For Earl Spencer to know the exact hour, location, and wardrobe details of the event, he had to have received an inside leak from someone working directly within the Central Palace Secretariat. The realization that a senior staff member is actively coordinating with the Spencer family completely terrifies the king's chief of staff. This exposes a massive vulnerability at the very heart of the household's operational security. Someone inside the palace wanted this confrontation to happen, or at minimum wanted Spencer to have the information he needed to make it happen. As the security team finally manages to guide Earl Spencer toward a quiet exit corridor, the true emotional cost begins to manifest. Prince William had stood completely frozen, just a few feet away throughout the entire exchange, watching his mother's brother openly attack his stepmother while his father struggled to maintain composure. The sudden violent collision of his childhood trauma with his modern royal duties proves completely overwhelming. Without saying a single word to his father or the remaining guests, William turns on his heel and walks rapidly out of the room through a side door leading to the private state apartments. Now this is where the story shifts from a family confrontation to something much more personal. The heavy mahogany door of the private anteroom clicks shut with a sharp echoing snap, cutting off the distant, anxious hum of the compromised reception below. Prince William walks blindly toward the tall sash window overlooking the darkened courtyard. His hands are trembling as he reaches for the brass window latch. He leans his forehead against the cold, damp glass pane, staring out into the empty London night. The stoic, unyielding armor he spent nearly 30 years meticulously assembling vanishes completely within the span of a single breath. The Prince of Wales quietly breaks into tears, completely alone in the dim light of the palace flat. That image matters because it highlights the agonizing dual reality William has been forced to navigate since the summer of 1997. To the global public, he's the ultimate symbol of royal stability, a steady modern leader who approaches state duties with calm clinical precision. Beneath that perfectly curated public image sits a man deeply scarred by the toxic public breakdown of his parents' marriage and the tragic premature loss of his mother. By forcing Princess Diana's brother and Queen Camilla into an open, aggressive confrontation over a piece of personal jewelry, the ambush tore away decades of psychological scar tissue, dragging William straight back to the most terrifying moments of his teenage years. The tension escalates rapidly as the king's senior private secretary arrives outside the anteroom door, holding a secure internal briefing folder. The official knocks softly, hesitant to intrude upon the heir's rare moment of vulnerability. But the administrative crisis building downstairs requires immediate executive direction. King Charles has demanded an instant lockdown of the event's communication logs, but the palace staff is completely paralyzed, terrified to act without knowing where the future king stands on the dispute. William does not answer the door. He stays in the shadows of the window frame, struggling to regain control over his voice before facing the bureaucratic machinery of the crown. The sudden emotional withdrawal introduces a massive, highly sensitive mystery into the center of the household's operational command. For several years, William has maintained a strict professional working relationship with his stepmother, recognizing her vital role in supporting his father through the heavy demands of the modern throne. He consistently backed Camilla during major family transitions, even supporting her elevation to queen consort during the final months of the late queen's reign. So why does the sight of his uncle confronting her cause him to retreat in absolute distress, rather than stepping forward to defend the current queen from a public insult? The answer to this psychological riddle lies buried within a secret pact William made with his uncle Earl Spencer during a private gathering at Althorpe House in the summer of 2024. The Prince of Wales quietly assured his mother's family that while he would always respect the official hierarchy of the current reign, he would never allow Diana's private sentimental artifacts to be absorbed into Camilla's public wardrobe rotation. When he walked into the reception room and saw his stepmother wearing the unique wedding brooch, William felt completely blindsided by his own staff's oversight. He realized the palace's styling team had inadvertently violated his private promise to the Spencers, making an explosive family clash absolutely inevitable. That timeline doesn't add up if you assume everyone was on the same page. They clearly weren't. The situation grows even more critical when Charles's personal equerry bypasses the security locks to deliver a direct handwritten note from the king. The message, written in the sovereign's characteristic fountain pen script, demands William's immediate return to the drawing room to present a unified family front before the remaining foreign dignitaries are officially dismissed. The king is absolutely furious about the security breach and wants his son to stand shoulder to shoulder with Camilla to signal to the watching diplomats that the crown will not be intimidated by the rogue actions of an angry peer. William reads the short note under the dim glow of the desk lamp, and his expression hardens as the initial wave of grief transforms into cold, protective anger. He flatly refuses to return to the reception hall, telling the equerry to inform the king that he will not participate in a stage show of family harmony while his mother's memory is being weaponized for a palace public relations strategy. That blunt refusal represents a monumental, unprecedented defiance of his father's immediate authority. It opens a dangerous structural rift between the office of the Prince of Wales and the office of the King that threatens to destabilize the administration's long-term planning. The mystery of how the palace would manage this deep internal rebellion deepens when Kensington Palace's personal digital communications team detects an unusual spike in encryption activity originating from Earl Spencer's legal advisors. The Spencers are not retreating to Northamptonshire to let the matter settle quietly. They're already drafting a formal statement to the press, prepared to explain the exact historical provenance of the disputed brooch, if the palace attempts to cover up the evening's incident as a minor scheduling mistake. William realizes his father's policy of absolute stoic silence will be completely useless against an aristocratic family that possesses a global media platform and a deep multi-generational grudge against the court. By 11 at night, the anteroom has transformed into a temporary command post for William's most trusted personal advisors. They sit around the low coffee table methodically reviewing the original inventory lists from the 1997 Royal Probate Registries to determine the exact legal status of the sapphire jewelry pieces. The Prince of Wales has completely composed himself. His eyes still slightly red from the initial shock, but his demeanor is now entirely focused on structural containment. He knows that if this specific property dispute enters the public domain, it will trigger a massive uncontrollable wave of media speculation that would permanently damage both his father's fragile health recovery and his daughter Princess Charlotte's future inheritance options. The final realization of the long, exhausting evening is that the traditional boundaries of family loyalty have been completely obliterated by the Althorpe ambush. William can no longer rely on the old comfortable assumption that his dual roles as a loving son and a protective guardian of his mother's legacy can exist in perfect harmony. The lines have been drawn in the middle of a palace ballroom, and the future king is left to navigate a fractured, high-stakes emotional landscape, where every single choice carries the potential to trigger an all-out civil war within the modern House of Windsor. Meanwhile, a tense silence grips the private study at Clarence House at exactly 2 in the morning. King Charles paces the floor, his face etched with fatigue and frustration as he listens to a direct briefing from his senior personal protection officer. On his desk sits a secure tablet displaying the internal security logs from the chaotic reception. His stepmother's crown property battle had been a massive administrative headache, but this public security breach is an institutional disaster. The king stops pacing, looks down at his desk, and demands an immediate, exhaustive explanation for how Earl Spencer managed to penetrate his private perimeter. The king finds himself completely caught in the middle of a brutal multi-layered dilemma. His current medical recovery requires absolute calm, yet his former brother-in-law just launched an aggressive domestic assault right in front of his diplomatic guests. Charles has to balance his instinct to defend Queen Camilla, who is publicly humiliated on his watch, against the fragile emotional state of his son, Prince William. He knows that if he pushes too hard for aggressive legal retaliation against the Spencer family, he risks permanently breaking his relationship with the Prince of Wales, who has already retreated into cold, defensive silence. The immediate mystery surrounding the confrontation shifts from a security breakdown to a technical failure within the palace's own clothing departments. The king's chief of staff spends the early morning hours investigating how the controversial diamond and sapphire brooch ended up pinned to the queen's lapel in the first place. The researchers discover that the royal styling team relied on an outdated inventory database updated in 2005. They completely missed a highly sensitive, unredacted legal memorandum from 1996 that restricted the public display of certain wedding gifts tied to the Spencer line. This administrative discovery does little to calm the king's rising anger. Charles realizes that while the mistake was technical, the public relations fallout is entirely political. The British media landscape is already saturated with commentary regarding the historical treatment of Princess Diana, and this sudden public confrontation threatens to undo years of careful reputation management. The king's personal advisors from the Privy Council warn him that any public statement or legal counterstrike will only invite further scrutiny into the family's private financial records and jewelry vaults, a scenario the Treasury Department desperately wants to avoid. The mystery of the king's next step deepens when his communications director presents an emergency media monitoring report. Several high-profile news outlets in London are already preparing morning segments on the confrontation, having received anonymous tips detailing William's emotional exit from the ballroom. Charles knows he cannot afford to let the press package this incident as a sign of permanent structural instability within the core leadership team. He needs an immediate unified response, but his son is completely refusing to answer the internal palace telephone lines. The king chooses to handle the crisis by asserting his ultimate authority over the household's operational scheduling. He bypasses his regular council of advisors and issues a direct executive instruction to the royal diary coordinators. He orders a major immediate modification to the upcoming autumn calendar, completely separating the public appearance paths of the Queen and the Prince of Wales for the next 90 days. This drastic administrative move is designed to give William the emotional distance he requires to process the trauma of the ambush, while ensuring Camilla can continue her state duties without facing another unexpected family confrontation. With the immediate calendar changes finalized, Charles turns his attention to containing the legal threats coming from the Spencer estate attorneys. He knows the Earl is fully prepared to escalate the dispute to an open tribunal if the brooch is not removed from the Crown collection instantly. The king quietly authorizes his personal solicitors to sign a formal temporary waiver transferring physical custody of the disputed artifact back to a secure holding vault managed by a private bank in London. It's a pragmatic, quiet surrender designed to protect the Crown's wider operational security, but it leaves a bitter taste inside the private quarters of Clarence House. The long, exhausting night concludes with a quiet confrontation between the king and his senior security detail. Charles makes it completely clear that any future breakdown in protocol will result in an immediate restructuring of the protection teams. He has successfully contained the immediate crisis through strategic compromises and diary shifts, but the domestic peace of his reign has been permanently compromised. The traditional power structures of the court are being constantly challenged by historic family resentments, and the king is left to govern his fractured household with a newfound heavy sense of isolation that no royal decree can ever truly cure. Then comes the formal legal packet from Spencer and Associates arriving at the Buckingham Palace registry desk at precisely 9 the following morning. The document package is marked for the immediate personal attention of the king's chief solicitor. It contains comprehensive, uncompromising demands backed by independent constitutional case law. Princess Diana's maternal family is not content with a mere verbal apology from the palace styling team. They issue a strict 72-hour deadline for the permanent legal removal of the diamond and sapphire wedding brooch from the royal collection registries. The intense pressure behind this legal ultimatum highlights the changing dynamic between traditional crown authorities and the historic aristocratic families of Great Britain. For generations, the peerage typically deferred to the sovereign on matters of property and dress, preferring to settle domestic friction through quiet, unrecorded compromises behind closed doors. However, the legal trustees of the Althorpe estate are operating under a completely different modern philosophy. They view the unauthorized public display of their family's historic heirloom as a clear violation of explicit trust agreements signed during the 1996 divorce settlements. The tension within the palace legal department peaks as the solicitors cross-reference the Spencer demands with a series of historic statutes governing private inheritances within the British peerage. Earl Spencer's lawyers include a specific clause referencing the Hereditary Artifacts Protection Act, a piece of legislation that shields ancient family treasures from being permanently absorbed by the crown during times of marital transition. If the palace chooses to ignore the 72-hour deadline, the Spencer trustees are fully prepared to file an immediate public petition in the High Court. Such an action would force an unprecedented judicial review of the crown's private jewelry acquisition policies. The immediate mystery that paralyses the royal advisors is how Prince William will react to this official legal assault against his father's household. As the future king and a core beneficiary of his mother's private trust, William holds a unique dual position that could entirely determine the outcome of the dispute. If he chooses to back his father's lawyers, the palace could potentially tie the Spencer trustees up in protracted legal maneuvers for years. However, if the Prince of Wales chooses to maintain his stance of defensive neutrality, the Crown's legal defense will completely collapse from a lack of family unity. The mystery of William's next strategic move is resolved during a private closed-door consultation with his personal legal advisors at Kensington Palace. The prince makes it completely clear that he will not authorize a single penny of his estate's resources to be used to fight his mother's family in an open court. He instructs his solicitors to draft a separate independent memorandum confirming that his office fully supports a clean, permanent separation of the disputed Spencer artifacts from the general crown wardrobe. This internal move completely dismantles the palace's defensive strategy, forcing the king's advisors to abandon any plans for a legal counterstrike. Faced with total non-cooperation from the heir to the throne, King Charles moves quickly to contain the institutional damage before the 72-hour deadline expires. He signs a formal executive release order authorizing the immediate and permanent transfer of physical and legal custody of the brooch back to the Spencer estate trustees to prevent a public media circus at the palace gates. The transfer is executed in the dead of night with a secure courier vehicle delivering the jewelry piece directly to a neutral high-security banking facility in the City of London. The ultimatum has been met, but the tactical surrender leaves an undeniable permanent fracture at the very highest levels of the royal household's administrative command. The final adjustments to the official royal calendar are uploaded to the Central Palace database by Friday afternoon, cementing a permanent structural rift between the court and the Spencer line. The new schedules confirm that all joint public appearances involving the Queen Consort and the Prince of Wales have been eliminated from the autumn diary. The palace communications team no longer even attempts to project an image of seamless family harmony to the international press packs, preferring instead to manage the family's deep internal divide through a policy of total physical separation. The physical reality of this new power dynamic transforms the emotional landscape of the House of Windsor. Queen Camilla quietly withdraws several other historic pieces from her active jewelry rotation, choosing to rely strictly on modern uncontested items to avoid triggering another unexpected confrontation with aristocratic factions. Her inner circle views the entire episode as a permanent tactical setback, a realization that despite her high official status as the king's wife, certain corners of the family's history will remain forever closed to her influence. The true resolution of the entire crisis, however, occurs far away from the public gaze within the quiet private grounds of Windsor Great Park. William arranges a completely unannounced meeting with his uncle Earl Spencer to finalize a private family pact that will ensure long-term peace between their respective houses. The Prince of Wales does not bring any official palace advisors or communication staff to the meeting, choosing instead to handle the final logistics of his mother's legacy as a private family matter. During this quiet summit, William secures a binding personal agreement with Earl Spencer regarding the long-term destination of the disputed diamond and sapphire wedding brooch. Rather than allowing the piece to sit indefinitely in a dark underground banking vault, the Spencer trustees agree to formally register the artifact as a future personal inheritance for Princess Charlotte. The paperwork is structured so that the jewelry will bypass the central crown collection entirely, transferring directly to the young princess when she reaches her 18th birthday to ensure it remains firmly within the direct biological line of Diana's descendants. This masterstroke of family diplomacy achieves exactly what the palace's corporate lawyers could not. It successfully satisfies the Spencer family's intense desire to protect their historical legacy, while simultaneously ensuring that a priceless piece of royal history will eventually return to the direct line of succession, without triggering an expensive public high court battle. William has successfully used his independent legal authority to heal a dangerous institutional wound, proving to both his father and the watching courtiers that he is fully capable of managing the family's most sensitive crises with an iron will and absolute legal precision. As the autumn mist settles over the Long Walk at Windsor, the immediate media storm surrounding the Althorpe ambush finally begins to fade from the front pages of the morning newspapers. The rooms at St. James's Palace return to their usual highly scripted stillness, but the traditional power dynamics of the court have been completely rewritten by a single week of high-stakes domestic warfare. The lines have been drawn, the legal covenants are securely registered, and the future king is left to navigate his fractured household with a newfound complete independence that will forever alter the trajectory of his upcoming reign. The brooch will wait in a vault until Princess Charlotte turns 18, a quiet symbol of a promise kept between a nephew and his uncle, and a reminder that some family wounds never fully heal, no matter how many palace doors you close.